The following content is provided strictly for educational and entertainment purposes. It does not constitute professional financial, legal, investment, or automotive advice. Information regarding vehicle specifications, government tax credits, market projections, and infrastructure development is based on historical trends, current legislative frameworks, and industry case studies available as of early 2026. Electric vehicle technology and federal policies are subject to rapid change and localized variations. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own thorough due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before making significant financial commitments or purchasing decisions related to the automotive industry. The American gas station, an icon of the 20th century landscape, is officially entering its twilight era, but the transition currently unfolding across the United States is nothing like the smooth, green utopia originally promised in glossy brochures a decade ago. We are standing at a definitive crossroads in 2026, a year that historians will likely look back upon as the Great Electric Fracture. For the first time in history, the conversation has shifted from whether you can buy an electric vehicle to whether the American infrastructure can actually sustain the millions of them now hitting the pavement. While the early adopters have already moved into their second or third generation of ownership, the vast majority of the American public is staring down a market that feels increasingly volatile, confusing, and high stakes. The shocking reality is that while battery costs have plummeted by nearly 90% over the last decade, the hidden costs of ownership, from insurance premiums to tire wear and specialized maintenance, are creating a secondary wave of sticker shock that many consumers were never prepared for. This is the moment where the hype of the Silicon Valley startup meets the hard reality of the Rust Belt manufacturing floor. If you think the revolution is just about swapping a gas tank for a battery, you are missing 90% of the story. We are witnessing a fundamental rewriting of the American social contract with the road, and by the time this year is over, the way you travel, spend your paycheck, and power your home will be unrecognizable compared to just 3 years ago. This deep dive masterclass serves as your definitive roadmap through the chaos of 2026. For the average American family today, the primary problem is no longer range anxiety, the fear of running out of power on a highway, but ecosystem anxiety. You are faced with a dizzying array of competing charging standards, fluctuating federal tax incentives that seem to change with every legislative session, and a used car market that has seen unprecedented levels of depreciation. This video solves that problem by providing a granular, data-driven analysis of the actual cost-to-benefit ratios of the 2026 electron volts lineup. We are moving past the surface-level reviews and looking at the structural shifts in the United States energy grid, the impact of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula program, and the emergence of the software-defined vehicle, which treats your car more like a smartphone than a mechanical tool. By the end of this series, you will understand the potential outcomes of the current market trajectory, supported by historical trends of technological adoption cycles, so you can make a decision that protects your household's financial stability rather than falling victim to the latest marketing trend. To understand where we are in 2026, we must first examine the death cross of the internal combustion engine. Historical trends in the automotive sector suggest that once a new technology reaches a 5% market share, the transition to mass market dominance becomes an inevitability rather than a possibility. As we move through this year, we are seeing the results of the 2026 EPA regulations, which have effectively forced legacy automakers to pivot their entire research and development budgets away from gasoline engines. This has created a supply-side squeeze, where the variety of new internal combustion vehicles is dwindling, while the electric options are exploding. However, this explosion in choice has led to a massive fragmentation of the market. In 2026, we are seeing a clear divide between legacy-based EVs and ground-up architectures. Case studies from the early 2020s showed that many manufacturers simply tried to electrify existing gas-powered frames, resulting in compromised interior space and inefficient battery placement. Today, the 2026 models we are seeing are almost entirely based on dedicated electric platforms, often referred to as skateboards, which allow for radically different interior designs and lower centers of gravity. We must also address the massive shift in the American charging landscape. We have moved beyond the Wild West era where every manufacturer had a different plug. The industry-wide adoption of the North American Charging System, or NACS, has become the standard for 2026. This means that for the first time, a Ford owner, A GM owner and a Tesla owner can all utilize the same high-speed infrastructure without the need for cumbersome adapters that often failed or reduced charging speeds. But this universal access has created a new set of challenges: queuing and reliability. Data from the first quarter of 2026 suggests that while the number of charging ports has increased by over 300% since 2022, the uptime of these chargers remains a significant pain point. We will be looking at how the federal government is now tying funding to 97% uptime requirements and what that means for your holiday road trip. Furthermore, we are witnessing the birth of the vehicle-to-home, or V2H economy. In 2026, your car is no longer just a depreciating asset sitting in your driveway. It is a backup generator for your house. With the increasing frequency of grid instability in various parts of the country, the ability to use your vehicle's massive battery pack to power your refrigerator, HVAC system, and lights during an outage has become one of the most significant selling points for the American consumer. We will dive into the specific hardware requirements for this, as many homeowners are discovering that their current electrical panels are not equipped to handle the bidirectional flow of energy, leading to unexpected installation costs that can range from $2,000 to $5,000. The economic reality of 2026 also involves a critical look at the total cost of ownership, or TCO. While the initial purchase price of an EV has reached parity with gas cars in many segments, the insurance industry has not yet caught up. Because EVs are often totaled by insurance companies for relatively minor battery casing damage, premiums for electric vehicles in 2026 remain significantly higher than their gasoline counterparts. We will analyze case studies of various zip codes across the U.S. to show you how your location might negate any fuel savings you hope to achieve. We are also seeing the emergence of the solid-state battery promise. While not yet in mass-market vehicles for 2026, the first pilot programs are launching, creating a waiting game for some consumers who fear their current lithium-ion vehicles will become obsolete. We will dissect the chemistry of these batteries and provide a realistic timeline, so you don't get stuck waiting for technology that may still be years away from true affordability. This is not a story about saving the planet or disrupting the industry. It is a story about the practical, gritty, and often frustrating reality of a nation retooling its entire identity. From the mining of lithium in the Nevada desert to the software updates that can change your car's horsepower overnight, the 2026 electric car revolution is the most complex consumer shift in a century. Over the next 9 parts of this masterclass, we will break down every component of this revolution, ensuring that when you step onto a dealership lot or browse an online inventory, you are the most informed person in the room. We are starting this journey by looking at the specific models that are defining this year and the technological breakthroughs that have finally made the long-range, affordable EV a reality for the American middle class. To understand why 2026 represents the true tipping point for the American middle class, we have to look at the death of the $30,000 barrier. For years, the electric vehicle market was bifurcated between high-end luxury performance machines and budget-conscious compliance cars, with ranges that barely covered a suburban commute. In 2026, that middle ground has finally been conquered. Imagine a consumer named Marcus living in Columbus, Ohio. Marcus represents the quintessential American driver. He commutes 35 miles each way, manages a household with 2 children, and operates on a strict monthly budget where every cent of a car payment is scrutinized. In previous years, Marcus viewed electric cars as a toy for the wealthy or a secondary vehicle for short trips. However, the 2026 market has introduced what industry analysts call the mass-market modular platform. Manufacturers like Chevrolet, Ford, and even newcomers like Rivian have moved their second-generation platforms into full-scale production, allowing them to offer vehicles with 300 miles of range at a price point that rivals the average gasoline-powered crossover. Historical trends in battery manufacturing explain this shift. Between 2020 and 2026, the cost per kilowatt-hour of lithium iron phosphate batteries, or LFP, dropped significantly. Unlike the nickel-cobalt manganese batteries found in high-performance models, LFP batteries are cheaper to produce, use more abundant materials, and offer a much longer cycle life. For Marcus, this means he can now purchase a vehicle like the 2026 Equinox EV or the updated Ford Explorer Electric without the premium price tag that defined the early 2020s. But the price of the car is only half the story. The 2026 landscape is defined by the integration of the Federal Clean Vehicle Credit directly at the point of sale. In the past, buyers had to wait until tax season to see their $7,500 benefit. Today, that credit is applied instantly at the dealership, functioning as a massive down payment that lowers Marcus's monthly financing costs by over $150 immediately. This brings us to a critical case study: the 2026 used EV market. We are currently seeing the first massive wave of 3-year-old leased electric vehicles hitting the secondary market. In 2023 and 2024, record numbers of EVs were pushed into the fleet through aggressive leasing programs. Now, in 2026, those vehicles are flooding used car lots across the United States. This has created a unique phenomenon where a high-tech, low-mileage electric vehicle can be acquired for under $25,000. For a first-time buyer, this is the most accessible entry point in history. However, this abundance comes with a new set of risks that Marcus and every other American buyer must navigate. We are seeing a divergence in value based on thermal management systems. Vehicles that use passive cooling for their batteries in the early 2020s are showing significantly higher degradation than those with active liquid cooling. A $25,000 used EV might seem like a bargain, but if the battery health has dipped below 80% of its original capacity, the utility for a commuter like Marcus vanishes. Beyond the hardware, 2026 has introduced the era of the software-defined range. Imagine Marcus is driving home during an Ohio blizzard. In 2022, his range would have plummeted by 40% due to the energy required to heat the cabin. In 2026, standard heat pump technology and advanced thermal scavenging systems have changed the math. Modern EVs are now designed to capture waste heat from the motors and the battery to warm the interior, preserving the range that Marcus needs to get home safely. Furthermore, the 2026 models are utilizing AI-driven route planning that is integrated directly into the vehicle's operating system. This isn't just a map, it is a real-time energy management consultant. It accounts for wind speed, elevation changes, and the current congestion at charging stations to provide an arrival state of charge that is accurate within 1%. This level of precision has effectively killed the psychological barrier of range anxiety for the informed consumer. However, the revolution in 2026 isn't just about personal transportation. It is about the radical transformation of the American workplace. Potential outcomes for companies across the U.S. now include mandatory workplace charging as a standard employee benefit. Consider a case study of a mid-sized logistics firm in Atlanta. By installing Level 2 charging stations in their parking decks, they have effectively provided their employees with a free fuel benefit that equates to a $2,000 annual raise. For the employee, the car charges while they work, eliminating the need to ever visit a public charging station during the week. This shift is placing immense pressure on the commercial real estate market, as buildings without robust electrical infrastructure are seeing their lease values drop. In 2026, fueling has moved from a destination-based activity at a gas station to a background activity that happens while you sleep or work. But we must also look at the step-by-step reality of the 2026 maintenance cycle. Historical trends suggested that EVs would be maintenance-free, but the reality of 2026 is more nuanced. While Marcus no longer pays for oil changes, spark plugs, or timing belts, he is discovering the weight tax. Electric vehicles are significantly heavier than their internal combustion counterparts due to the battery pack. This weight places extreme stress on the tires. In 2026, tire manufacturers have launched specialized EV-rated tires designed for high torque and heavy loads, but these tires come with a 20% price premium. Additionally, the regenerative braking systems in 2026 are so efficient that many drivers rarely use their physical brake pads. While this sounds like a benefit, it has led to a new maintenance issue: brake oxidation. Because the mechanical brakes aren't used, they can seize or rust over time in northern climates. Maintenance in 2026 has shifted from mechanical repair to specialized inspections of high-voltage cabling and cooling loops. The data also points toward a massive shift in the American power grid's relationship with the car. In 2026, the concept of managed charging has become mainstream. Utilities in states like California, New York, and Texas now offer EV-only electricity rates that drop to near zero during off-peak hours. For Marcus, this means his car communicates with the grid to only draw power when demand is lowest. This symbiotic relationship is what prevents the grid from collapsing under the weight of millions of new electric vehicles. It is a sophisticated dance of data and electrons that was theoretical 5 years ago, but is the backbone of American energy stability today. We have explored how the car is becoming affordable and how it integrates into your daily life, But there is a darker side to this rapid transition that most people are ignoring. As we move into the second half of 2026, the digital divide in the automotive world is becoming a chasm. While Marcus enjoys his seamless updates and low fuel costs, a significant portion of the population is being left behind in charging deserts. These are areas, often in rural America or lower-income urban centers, where the infrastructure hasn't arrived, and the cost of upgrading home electricity is prohibitive. This geographic inequality is creating a two-tiered mobility system that could define American social dynamics for the next decade. If the 2026 electric car is a rolling computer, then who actually owns the data it generates? Every mile Marcus drives, every song he streams, and every time he plugs into a charger, he is generating a goldmine of information. In the next part, we are going to expose the hidden economy of EV data privacy and the terrifying reality of feature as a service, where your heated seats or extra horsepower could be locked behind a monthly subscription fee. You might own the car, but in 2026, do you actually own the right to drive it how you want? We are diving deep into the subscription trap that every American needs to watch out for. The subscription trap of 2026 is not just a minor inconvenience. It is a fundamental shift in the definition of private property. For decades, the American relationship with the automobile was defined by a single transaction. You bought the car, you owned the hardware, and you had access to every mechanical feature that came off the assembly line. But as we move through 2026, the software-defined vehicle has turned your driveway into a marketplace of recurring microtransactions. Imagine a driver named Sarah in Denver. Sarah just picked up a brand new electric SUV. On paper, her vehicle is equipped with a high-fidelity sound system, heated seats, and a battery capable of 400 miles of range. However, when she sits in the driver's seat, she discovers that her heated steering wheel is grayed out on the touchscreen. A notification pops up. To activate this comfort feature during the winter months, a monthly fee of $18 is required. This is the reality of the 2026 feature-as-a-service model. Manufacturers have realized that hardware is a one-time profit margin, but software is an eternal revenue stream. From a manufacturing perspective, it is cheaper to build every single car with the same high-end components, like heated seat coils or advanced sensor suites, and then lock them behind a digital paywall. This allows the factory to maintain a streamlined production line while using software to tier the product for different consumers. For Sarah, this means her car is essentially a vessel for potential features rather than a collection of owned tools. Historical trends in the tech industry, specifically within the smartphone and gaming sectors, have now fully bled into the automotive world. We are seeing case studies where performance upgrades, such as an extra 50 horsepower or a faster 0 to 60 acceleration time, are offered as an over-the-air subscription. If Sarah wants that extra boost for a weekend road trip through the Rockies, she can toggle it on for $49, only for the car to return to its base power level on Monday morning. The data behind this shift is staggering. By 2026, industry projections suggest that software-related revenue for major automakers could account for up to 10% of their total annual earnings. This has created a massive incentive for companies to move away from the traditional sales model. We are seeing the emergence of the battery-as-a-service tier. In some 2026 models, the physical battery pack in Sarah's car might be a 100 kilowatt-hour unit, but she is only permitted to use 75% of it based on her subscription level. If she decides to move across the country and needs more range, she must pay a monthly premium to unlock the chemistry that is already physically present under her floorboards. This leads to a complex legal and ethical debate over what it actually means to own a vehicle. If Sarah stops paying her connectivity fee, does she lose access to her navigation system? In many 2026 models, the answer is yes. The vehicle becomes a brick of offline hardware, losing the real-time traffic data, charging station availability, and even the ability to precondition the cabin temperature from a mobile app. Step by step, this subscription model is also transforming the used car market. Imagine Sarah tries to sell her car in 3 years. In the old world, the features added value to the resale price. In 2026, many of these software unlocks are non-transferable. The second owner, let's call him James, might buy Sarah's car thinking he is getting a fully loaded SUV, only to find out that he has to resubscribe to every single feature Sarah already paid for. This second-hand monetization is a potential outcome that is causing a massive headache for valuation experts like Kelley Blue Book. How do you value a car that could lose half its features the moment the title changes hands? This lack of transparency is creating a friction point in the American economy that many consumers are only beginning to realize. But the subscription trap goes deeper than just comfort features. It extends into the realm of safety and autonomy. In 2026, advanced driver assistance systems, or ADAS, are often sold as a tiered service. Sarah's car might be physically capable of hands-free highway driving, but that capability is tied to a monthly safety cloud subscription. Manufacturers argue that these fees are necessary to maintain the high-definition mapping and server costs required to keep the AI safe and updated. However, for the consumer, this feels like a tax on peace of mind. If Sarah's subscription lapses while she is on a long drive, the car might provide a warning that her lane keeping and adaptive cruise control will be disabled at the next engine start. This creates a high-stakes environment where your vehicle's capabilities are constantly being audited by a remote server. We must also analyze the cybersecurity implications of this permanent connection. Every 2026 electric vehicle is effectively a node on a massive corporate network. This allows for seamless over-the-air updates that can fix recalls without a trip to the dealership, a significant benefit that has saved the industry billions. But it also means that your car is vulnerable to software bugs and central server outages. Historical trends show that as cars become more reliant on central data centers, the risk of a system-wide failure increases. If the manufacturer's authentication server goes down, Sarah might find herself unable to even start her vehicle, or she might be locked out of the fast charging network because her digital wallet cannot verify her identity. To navigate this, the American public is starting to see the rise of right-to-repair legislation specifically targeting software. In 2026, several states are debating bills that would force automakers to provide permanent access to hardware features once a car reaches a certain age, or once the original owner has paid a specific amount in fees. This is a battle for the soul of the American road. On one side, you have the tech-forward vision of a car that gets better over time through software. On the other, you have the traditional American value of total ownership and mechanical autonomy. The financial impact on the average household is significant. If you add up the subscriptions for range unlocking, heated seats, high-speed data, and autonomous driving features, Sarah could be looking at an additional $100 to $200 a month on top of her car payment. This hidden car payment is often omitted from the MSRP advertised on television. It is a slow bleed of capital that shifts the car from a one-time investment into a perpetual service obligation. We are seeing a shift where the low-cost base model is actually a trap designed to get you into the ecosystem, where the real costs are hidden in the fine print of the digital user agreement. Beyond the cost, there is the issue of data harvesting. Sarah's car is not just a mode of transport, it is a data vacuum. In 2026, the sensors on her vehicle are constantly mapping the environment, recording her driving habits, and even tracking her eye movements to ensure she is paying attention to the road. This data is incredibly valuable to insurance companies, urban planners, and advertisers. The potential outcomes of this data collection include personalized insurance premiums based on exactly how hard Sarah brakes or how often she exceeds the speed limit by even 5 miles per hour. The connected car is a double-edged sword. It offers unprecedented convenience, but it demands an unprecedented level of surveillance. As we look at the complexity of the software trap, we have to ask, what happens when this technology actually fails? While Sarah is worried about her heated seat subscription, a much larger crisis is brewing beneath the surface of the American road. The very batteries that power these high-tech machines are nearing a massive environmental and logistical wall. As millions of these cars age, we are facing a mountain of spent cells and a supply chain that is increasingly fragile. In the next part, we are going to dive into the battery graveyard and the looming lithium crisis that could bring the entire revolution to a grinding halt. You've seen the shiny new cars, but you haven't seen where they go to die, and the cost of recycling them might just be the most expensive secret in the industry. The battery graveyard of 2026 is not a single location but a sprawling network of specialized warehouses and processing facilities that are currently struggling to keep pace with a phenomenon known as the first wave of mass retirement. To visualize this, imagine a man named David who lives on the outskirts of Reno, Nevada. David has spent 20 years working in traditional auto salvage, but his yard looks very different this year. Instead of stacks of rusted steel frames and leaking oil pans, he is surrounded by thousands of heavy, silver-encased modules that weigh nearly half a ton each. These are the hearts of the first-generation mass-market electric vehicles, the cars that were sold in record numbers between 2012 and 2016. In 2026, these batteries have reached the end of their useful automotive life. typically defined as when they can no longer hold more than 70% of their original charge. David represents a new class of American worker, the battery technician who must manage the volatile transition of millions of pounds of lithium-ion waste. Historical trends in the electronics industry suggested that recycling would be an afterthought, much like it was for smartphones and laptops. However, the sheer scale of an EV battery makes that approach impossible in 2026. A single electric truck battery contains more lithium than 10,000 iPhones. Because of this, the United States is currently engaged in a frantic effort to build a circular economy from scratch. The data for 2026 indicates that nearly 250,000 metric tons of lithium-ion batteries are reaching their end-of-life status this year alone. If these are not handled correctly, the potential outcomes include soil contamination and high-intensity chemical fires that are notoriously difficult for local fire departments to extinguish. This is why the 2026 regulatory landscape has shifted. We are now seeing the implementation of the federal battery passport system. Every battery manufactured or sold in the U.S. now carries a digital identity that tracks its chemical composition, its ethical sourcing of materials, and its ownership history. For David, this means he cannot simply crush these batteries. He must scan them and ensure they are routed to the correct specialized facility. Step by step, the recycling process in 2026 has evolved into a high-stakes chemical operation. First, the battery packs must be safely discharged, a process that can take hours and requires specialized equipment to prevent thermal runaway. Once the energy is drained, the packs are disassembled, often by robots because the high-voltage architecture remains dangerous to human hands. The core of the recycling secret lies in what industry insiders call black mass. This is a powdery substance produced by shredding the battery cells in an oxygen-free environment. This black mass contains the holy trinity of EV minerals: lithium, cobalt, and nickel. In 2026, the technology for extracting these minerals has moved from pyrometallurgy, which involves high heat smelting that releases significant carbon emissions, to hydrometallurgy. This newer process uses chemical baths to leach out the metals at lower temperatures with higher recovery rates. Case studies from facilities in New York and Georgia show that we can now recover up to 98% of these critical minerals, but the cost remains the primary hurdle. Imagine if the cost of recycling a battery was actually higher than the cost of mining new materials from the earth. For much of the early 2020s, that was the reality. But in 2026, the geopolitical landscape has flipped the script. The U.S. government, under the 2026 domestic content requirements, has made it significantly more expensive to import raw materials from overseas. This has turned the battery graveyard into a battery mine. The lithium sitting in David's salvage yard is now more valuable than the lithium buried deep in the ground in South America, because it is already refined and located within American borders. This has created a gold rush for recycling startups, but for the average consumer, it has also created a hidden disposal fee. In 2026, when you buy a new EV, you may notice a battery life cycle fee of several $100s. This is effectively a deposit that ensures the manufacturer can afford to take the battery back in 10 years and process it without going bankrupt. However, not every battery goes straight to the shredder. 2026 has seen the explosion of the second life battery market. Imagine David's yard again, but this time he is testing modules that still have 80% health. While they are no longer suitable for a 3-ton SUV that needs to accelerate from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, they are perfect for stationary storage. Case studies from across the Sunbelt show that these retired car batteries are being bundled together to create massive grid-scale storage units. When the sun sets in Arizona or the wind stops in Texas, these second-life batteries discharge their energy back into the grid, preventing blackouts. This has created a secondary value for your car that didn't exist for gasoline engines. When David buys a wrecked 2024 Tesla in 2026, he isn't just buying scrap metal. He is buying a potential home backup system for a suburban family. This second life can extend the functional life of a battery by another 10 to 15 years, pushing the actual recycling date into the late 2030s. The lithium crisis of 2026 is the second half of this secret. Even with recycling, the demand for new EVs is outstripping the supply of raw materials. We are currently seeing the emergence of the Lithium Valley in California's Salton Sea and new mining operations in Thacker Pass, Nevada. These projects are the front lines of American energy independence, but they are also flashpoints for environmental and social conflict. Every mile of green driving starts with a massive industrial footprint. The potential outcomes of these domestic mining projects will determine if the U.S. can maintain its EV momentum, or if the 2026 revolution will stall due to a lack of core ingredients. We are seeing data that shows the price of lithium carbonate has remained volatile, fluctuating by as much as 30% in a single quarter, which directly impacts the sticker price of the cars on the showroom floor. For the American family, the battery graveyard is a reminder that the electric car is part of a much larger and much more expensive industrial cycle. If you are looking at a used EV in 2026, you have to ask, who is responsible for the battery at the end? If the manufacturer has gone out of business or the warranty has expired, you could be left with a £1,000 liability that costs $5,000 just to transport and dispose of legally. We are moving into an era where disposal insurance might become a standard part of an automotive policy. The transition is messy, the costs are high, and the infrastructure is still being built while the cars are already on the road. As David watches the latest shipment of retired modules arrive at his facility, he knows that the silver boxes he's handling are the only thing standing between a sustainable future and a catastrophic waste crisis. But while we are figuring out where the batteries go to die, an even more immediate problem is haunting every driver currently on the road. It's the great charging lie of 2026. You've been told that you can charge in 20 minutes, but for millions of Americans, the reality is a frustrating cycle of broken plugs, throttled speeds, and phantom chargers that don't actually exist. In the next part, we are going to expose the infrastructure failure that the manufacturers don't want you to see. Why is the 2026 charging network still the weakest link? And why are you paying premium prices for economy electricity? We are going behind the scenes of the grid's biggest failure. Imagine a driver named Alex. It is a rainy Tuesday in April 2026, and Alex is attempting a 500-mile journey from Chicago to Nashville in a brand new electric crossover. On his dashboard, the navigation system confidently displays a bright blue icon for a high-speed charging station just outside of Indianapolis. The app claims this station offers 350 kilowatt ultra-fast charging, which in theory should add 200 miles of range in about 15 minutes. Alex pulls off the interstate, his battery dipping toward 12%, only to find 3 of the 4 charging stalls covered in out-of-order bags. The single functioning stall is occupied by a delivery van that isn't even charging. It is just parked there. When the van finally moves and Alex plugs in, his charging speed doesn't hit 350 kilowatts. It barely reaches 40 kilowatts. This is the great charging lie of 2026, a systemic failure of infrastructure that has become the single greatest barrier to the electric revolution's success in the United States. To understand why Alex is sitting in a rainy parking lot for 90 minutes instead of 15, we have to look at the historical trends of charging reliability data. Between 2022 and 2025, several independent studies from organizations like J.D. Power and academic researchers at Berkeley found that nearly 1 in 5 public charging attempts in the U.S. failed. In 2026, while the sheer number of plugs has increased due to federal funding, the reliability percentage has remained stubbornly low. The issue is not just the lack of plugs, it is the lack of maintenance. Most charging networks operate on a third-party contractor model, where the company that owns the charger is not the company that services it. When a cooling fan in a 350 kilowatt cabinet fails in mid-July, it might take 3 weeks for a technician with the proper high-voltage certification to arrive. In the meantime, the charger either shuts down or, more commonly, enters a throttled state to prevent an electrical fire. This brings us to the technical phenomenon of power throttling, a concept many 2026 drivers are learning about the hard way. A high-speed charger is essentially a massive industrial transformer packed into a sleek plastic shell. These machines generate an incredible amount of heat. To deliver 350 kilowatts, the charging cable itself must be liquid-cooled. If the internal sensors detect that the coolant isn't flowing at the precise pressure required, the system instantly drops the power output to a crawl to protect the car's battery and the station's hardware. For Alex, this means his high-tech vehicle is being fed electricity at a rate slower than a common Level 2 home charger. Furthermore, we must look at the shared power architecture of many 2026 stations. If a station is rated for 500 kilowatts total, but has 4 stalls, and 4 cars plug in simultaneously, the available power is split. Alex might start at a high speed, but as soon as another driver plugs in next to him, his charge rate drops by half. The economic reality of public charging in 2026 has also become a shock to the American consumer. Historical trends in the early 2020s suggested that driving electric would always be cheaper than gasoline. However, as of 2026, the potential outcomes for long-distance travelers have shifted. While charging at home remains incredibly affordable, often costing Alex only $8 to $10 for a full charge, public fast charging rates have skyrocketed. Many private networks now charge between 45 and 65 cents per kilowatt-hour for a vehicle with a large 100 kilowatt-hour battery. A full public charge can cost over $50. When you factor in the reduced efficiency of driving at highway speeds or in cold weather, the cost per mile for Alex is now nearly identical to, or in some cases higher than, a high-efficiency hybrid gasoline vehicle. This creates a two-tiered economy. The revolution works perfectly for those with a garage and a home charger, but for renters or long-distance travelers, the financial benefit is evaporating. We must also analyze the progress of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. This $5 billion federal initiative was designed to eliminate charging deserts by placing high-speed stations every 50 miles along major American highways. In 2026, we are seeing the mixed results of this massive rollout. While thousands of miles of interstate are now technically covered, the implementation has been bogged down by bureaucratic hurdles at the state level. Case studies from states like Ohio and Pennsylvania show that while the money was allocated in 2022, many stations didn't break ground until late 2025 due to disagreements over utility grid upgrades. In many rural areas, the local electrical grid simply cannot support a 4-stall 350 kilowatt station without a multi-million-dollar transformer upgrade. If the local utility doesn't have the capacity, the charging company is forced to install massive on-site battery storage units to act as a buffer, further increasing the complexity and cost of the site. The frustration Alex feels isn't just about speed or cost. It is about the software handshake. Every time Alex plugs his car into a charger, a complex digital conversation occurs. The car must tell the charger its maximum voltage, its current temperature, and its payment credentials. In 2026, despite the industry moving toward the NACS standard, software bugs remain rampant. Historical trends show that as cars receive over-the-air updates, the communication protocols can break. Alex might plug in, and the car and charger might spend 5 minutes trying to authenticate, only to give him a generic communication error. This fragmentation is exacerbated by the need for multiple apps. Even in 2026, the dream of a single universal payment system for all chargers has not fully materialized. Alex's phone is cluttered with 8 different charging apps, each requiring a preloaded balance of $20. Beyond the technical failures, we are seeing the rise of charger rage. In high-density areas like Los Angeles or the Northeast Corridor, the ratio of cars to functioning chargers is reaching a breaking point. Case studies from holiday weekends in late 2025 showed wait times at popular charging hubs exceeding 2 hours. This has led to a breakdown in social etiquette. Drivers are reporting incidents of where gasoline vehicles intentionally block chargers, or plug pulling, where impatient drivers unplug a car that has reached an 80% charge to take the stall for themselves. This cultural friction is a direct result of the infrastructure not keeping pace with the aggressive sales targets set by manufacturers and the government. The grid itself is the final piece of this infrastructure failure. In 2026, we are beginning to see the limits of the last mile of the American electrical system. While we have enough power generation at a national level, the local wires and transformers in older suburban neighborhoods were never designed to have 5 houses on a single block all drawing 40 amps of power at the same time to charge SUVs. Potential outcomes of this bottleneck include localized brownouts or utilities being forced to implement strict charging quotas during peak hours. Alex might find that his home charger is remotely throttled by the power company between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. to prevent the neighborhood transformer from blowing a fuse. As Alex finally finishes his charge and pulls back onto the I-65, he is left wondering if the convenience he was promised will ever truly arrive. The hardware is here, the cars are beautiful, and the battery technology is improving, but the bridge between the car and the energy remains fragile. However, as frustrating as the charging experience can be, it is nothing compared to the quiet, invisible revolution happening inside the car's cockpit. While Alex was waiting for his battery to fill, his car was watching him. It was recording his eyes, his voice, and his movements. In the next part, we are going to dive into the privacy apocalypse of 2026. Your electric car is no longer a vehicle. It is a mobile surveillance hub that knows more about you than your smartphone does. We are going to look at the secret data brokers who are buying your driving habits and why your next car might report you to the police before you even know you've committed a violation. The sensors are always on and the doors are locked from the inside. We are exploring the end of privacy on the American road. To understand the scale of the privacy apocalypse in 2026, we need to look at the car not as a machine but as a data harvesting vacuum. Imagine a driver named Maya in Seattle. Maya is an early adopter of the latest 2026 luxury electric sedan, a vehicle she chose specifically for its advanced safety features and seamless integration with her digital life. As Maya drives to work, she believes she is in a private sanctuary. But the reality is that her car is currently performing thousands of microscopic observations every second. According to historical trends and recent studies by the Hermes Foundation, as many as 95% of new vehicles in 2026 are connected to the cloud, transferring personal data to manufacturer servers often without the driver's explicit, granular consent. For Maya, this means her car is not just recording where she goes but how she feels, who she talks to, and even the biological state of her body. The most intimate frontier of this data collection is the in-cabin monitoring system. In 2026, these systems have evolved far beyond simple infrared sensors that check if your eyes are open. At the 2026 Consumer Electronics Show, companies like Smart-Eye and Seeing Machines demonstrated the latest in biometric and agentic intelligence. Maya's car features an invisible camera embedded behind the digital instrument cluster. This camera uses vision language models to perform real-time eye tracking and facial expression analysis. While the manufacturer markets this as a safety feature to detect drowsiness or distraction, the data it generates is a goldmine for behavioral profiling. Potential outcomes of this technology include the car's AI detecting Maya's emotional state, noticing if she is frustrated, happy, or stressed, and then sharing that profile with third-party advertisers to deliver targeted content to her infotainment screen during her commute. But the tracking doesn't stop at emotions. Step by step, the modern electric vehicle maps the physical geography of your life with terrifying precision. In 2026, geolocation data is considered one of the most sensitive categories of information. Maya's car logs every GPS coordinate, every stop at a medical clinic, every visit to a place of worship, and every late-night trip to a fast food drive-thru. Under the 2026 California Consumer Privacy Act regulations, consumers technically have the right to opt out of the sale of this data, but many manufacturers have made these settings so deep within the software menus that the average driver never finds them. Furthermore, the 2026 regulatory landscape remains a patchwork. While states like California and Virginia have established protections, there is still no comprehensive federal law in the United States, leaving millions of drivers in other states vulnerable to having their movement patterns sold to the highest bidder on the data broker market. This brings us to the most direct financial impact of the 2026 privacy shift: the rise of behavior-based insurance. Historical trends in the insurance industry have shifted from using static markers like credit scores and zip codes to using real-time telematics. Maya's insurance provider offers a discount if she agrees to share her car's data. This is often framed as a way to reward safe driving, but it creates a high-stakes environment of constant surveillance. The car's sensors track Maya's acceleration, her cornering G-force, and exactly how hard she presses the brake pedal. In a 2026 case study, a driver in Georgia saw his monthly premium jump by 40% because the car's AI misidentified a defensive maneuver to avoid a stray dog as aggressive driving. This automated decision-making is a primary focus of the FTC in 2026, as regulators struggle to ensure that the algorithms used to judge American drivers are fair, transparent, and accurate. We must also confront the reality of vehicle forensics and law enforcement. In 2026, your car is the ultimate witness. Law enforcement agencies across the U.S. are increasingly utilizing specialized software, such as that produced by Burla, to extract data from a vehicle's onboard computers. When Maya plugs her smartphone into the car's USB port for charging, the vehicle may automatically sync her contacts, call logs, text messages, and even her social media feeds. This information is stored in the car's internal memory, often even after the phone is disconnected. In a legal context, investigators can now use a warrant to access event logs that show exactly when Maya opened her doors, how much weight was in the passenger seat, and her precise speed at the moment of an incident. In some jurisdictions, certain metadata, such as the presence of a specific Bluetooth ID, might even be accessible without a traditional search warrant, creating a massive loophole in the Fourth Amendment protections of the American driver. The 2026 electric car is also a mobile billboard that knows your shopping habits. Because the car is always connected to the charging network, it knows where you shop and what you eat while you wait for a charge. Case studies show that charging station apps are now partnering with retailers to push real-time notifications to Maya's phone the moment she plugs in near a shopping center. This ecosystem of data sharing between the vehicle, the charger, and the smartphone has turned the simple act of fueling up into a targeted marketing event. The potential outcomes for privacy are grim. Your car knows your routine better than your family does, and in 2026, that routine is a product being sold in real time. Furthermore, we are seeing the emergence of medical-grade monitoring within the cabin. By 2026, some high-end EVs are equipped with sensors that can detect micro-variations in skin tone to track heart rate and respiratory patterns. While this is designed to detect sudden sickness events like a seizure or stroke, it raises the question of health data privacy. If Maya's car detects an irregular heartbeat, who receives that information? Does it go to her doctor? Or does it find its way into a database used by a life insurance company to adjust her future rates? The 2026 Privacy Act reforms are attempting to address this by requiring a fair and reasonable test for data collection. But technology is currently moving much faster than the legal framework. The digital exhaust of a 2026 vehicle also includes its interactions with other cars and the city infrastructure. Known as V2X or Vehicle-to-Everything communication, Maya's car is constantly broadcasting its presence to traffic lights, other vehicles, and pedestrian safety systems. While this is essential for the future of autonomous driving, it creates a permanent, unerasable digital trail of Maya's existence on the road. There is no such thing as an anonymous drive in 2026. Every trip is logged, analyzed, and archived. As Maya parks her car at the end of the day, she walks away, unaware that her vehicle is still breathing data into the cloud. It is reporting its battery health, its location, and the diagnostic data from its last trip. She feels safe, but she has traded her anonymity for the convenience of a smart life. However, while we've been focusing on the invisible data leaving the car, we've ignored a much more physical and immediate danger. The same software that is watching Maya's eyes is also responsible for controlling her brakes, her steering, and her life. In the next part, we are going to dive into the ghost and the machine. What happens when the 2026 electric car's software glitches at 70 miles per hour? We are exploring the terrifying reality of phantom braking, over-the-air failures, and the life-or-death consequences of putting our trust in millions of lines of unverified code. The screen just went black, but the car is still moving. Are you ready for the reality of software-driven safety? Imagine a driver named Robert cruising down a multi-lane highway in Northern Virginia in his 2026 model year electric sedan. The year 2026 is significant because this is the era of the centralized vehicle architecture, where nearly every mechanical function is managed by a single high-performance computer. In older vehicles, a failed radio was just a silent drive, but for Robert, the screen in the center of his dashboard is his speedometer, his gear selector, and his safety interface. Suddenly, at 65 miles per hour, the screen flickers and goes pitch black. This is not a hardware failure. It is a software kernel panic. For a terrifying 10 seconds, Robert has no idea how fast he is going, whether his turn signals are functioning, or if his blind spot monitors are still active. While the mechanical steering and braking systems are designed with redundancies, the cognitive interface between the human and the machine has vanished. This scenario is no longer a rare glitch but a documented reality in the age of the software-defined vehicle. Historical trends from 2023 to 2025 showed a massive surge in software-related recalls. In fact, data suggests that by 2026, software bugs have overtaken mechanical defects as the leading cause of safety campaigns in the United States. To understand why this is happening, we have to look at the sheer complexity of the code. A modern electric vehicle in 2026 runs on approximately 100 million lines of code. For comparison, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner runs on about 14 million. The potential outcomes of managing this much complexity are unprecedented. When you have millions of lines of code interacting with real-world sensors, you encounter the phenomenon of the edge case. These are rare, unpredictable scenarios that the AI developers could not have anticipated during testing. A primary example of this is phantom braking. Imagine Robert is driving under a highway overpass. The sun is at a specific low angle, casting a sharp, dark shadow across the pavement. To the human eye, it is clearly just a shadow. But to the car's sensor suite, which may be relying on a combination of cameras and radar, The sudden change in contrast and depth might be interpreted as a solid wall or a stopped semi-truck. In a split second, the car's automated emergency braking system engages with full force. Robert is jerked forward in his seat as the car attempts to stop from 60 miles per hour to 0 on a clear road. Case studies from 2025 revealed that these phantom braking events are often caused by sensor fusion errors, where the different inputs of the car's eyes disagree with one another, and the system defaults to the safest perceived action: stopping. While this prevents a potential collision with a real object, it creates a massive risk for the drivers behind Robert, who are not expecting a dead stop in the middle of a highway. The 2026 reality also includes the high-stakes world of over-the-air updates, or OTA. In the early days, these updates were celebrated for adding new features like better maps or faster charging curves. However, by 2026, these updates have become a source of anxiety for many American households. Imagine Robert wakes up on a Monday morning, ready to drive to a high-stakes job interview. He walks out to his driveway only to find his car is in a bricked state. An update that was pushed to his vehicle at 3 a.m. failed halfway through due to a minor glitch in his home Wi-Fi or a server error on the manufacturer's end. Because the update touched the car's core gateway module, the vehicle cannot authenticate its own battery. The car is effectively a $60,000 paperweight. Step by step, Robert has to call a specialized mobile technician because a traditional tow truck could damage the locked drivetrain of his paralyzed EV. This brings us to the issue of regression testing in the 2026 software cycle. In the rush to push out new features and stay competitive, manufacturers are sometimes releasing software that fixes one bug while inadvertently creating 3 new ones. Case studies of 2026 software patches have shown instances where an update meant to improve climate control efficiency accidentally disabled the driver's side airbag sensor. Because the car is always connected, the manufacturer can see the error, but the delay between identifying the bug and deploying a fix can leave drivers like Robert in a vulnerable position for days or even weeks. This has led to a new kind of technical debt in the automotive industry, where cars are being sold with unfinished software that the manufacturer promises to refine later. We must also analyze the legal and ethical gray area of the black box. In 2026, every electric vehicle is equipped with an event data recorder that logs thousands of data points per second. If Robert were to get into an accident caused by a software glitch, the burden of proof is increasingly shifting toward him. Historical trends in litigation show that manufacturers often claim the driver should have overridden the system. But when a software-driven steering rack makes a sudden left turn due to a code error, the human reaction time is often too slow to compensate. In 2026, insurance companies and lawyers are fighting over who is at fault: the person behind the wheel or the engineer in Silicon Valley. The data in that black box is often encrypted and owned by the manufacturer, making it incredibly difficult for Robert to prove that the ghost in the machine was responsible for his crash. Furthermore, we are seeing the emergence of cybersecurity threats. In 2026, a car is essentially a high-powered server on wheels. While there have been no documented cases of large-scale malicious takeovers of moving vehicles, white-hat hackers have demonstrated that it is possible to remotely access a vehicle's climate control, infotainment, and even its GPS location through vulnerabilities in the mobile app. The potential outcomes of a security breach are far more serious than a stolen password. If a bad actor can remotely engage the horn, lights, or locks of thousands of vehicles simultaneously, they could create mass chaos on American roads. This is why 2026 has seen the rise of dedicated automotive cybersecurity firms that work around the clock to patch vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. For Robert and millions of other Americans, the trade-off is clear. The software-defined vehicle offers incredible convenience, from self-parking to predictive maintenance that tells you when a part is about to fail before it actually does. But this convenience comes at the cost of total mechanical transparency. You can no longer look under the hood and see what is wrong. You have to trust the lines of code and the server-side logic of a corporation miles away. The 2026 revolution is as much a digital transformation as it is a mechanical one, and the bugs are part of the journey. But as Robert sits in his car, waiting for his screen to reboot and praying that the sensors don't hallucinate another wall on the highway, a different kind of storm is brewing outside. While we have been looking at the software inside the car, the physical world is reacting to the massive surge in electricity demand. The very energy that Robert uses to fuel his software-driven machine is becoming the center of a national power struggle. In the next part, we are going to dive into the electric war. What happens when your car is competing with your neighbor's air conditioner for the last few kilowatts on a hot summer evening? We are exploring the collapse of the local transformer and the hidden reason why your city might start banning you from charging your car when you need it most. The grid is at its breaking point, and your car is the heavy hitter. Are you ready for the era of energy rationing? To understand the reality of energy rationing in 2026, we have to look at a driver named Jackson in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. It is a Tuesday in July, and the outside temperature has hovered at 112 degrees for 4 consecutive days. Jackson pulls his electric truck into his garage at 5:30 in the afternoon, his battery sitting at 20% after a long day of site visits. He plugs in his high-powered Level 2 charger, expecting the usual notification that his vehicle will be ready by morning. Instead, his smartphone pings with a priority alert from his local utility company. The message informs Jackson that due to extreme load on the local substation, EV charging in his zip code has been remotely curtailed until 11 p.m. This is the first day of mandatory demand response, a potential outcome that grid experts have been warning about for a decade, and in 2026, it has become a standard clause in many residential electricity contracts across the United States. The problem Jackson faces is not a lack of total electricity in the state of Arizona, but a failure of the last-mile infrastructure. Historical trends in the American power sector show that while we have significantly increased our renewable energy generation from solar and wind, the physical transformers sitting on utility poles in Jackson's neighborhood were mostly installed in the late 1970s and early 1980s. These transformers were designed to handle a block of houses with central air conditioning and a few kitchen appliances. They were never intended to support 4 or 5 houses on the same circuit, each drawing 10 to 19 kilowatts of power simultaneously to fast-charge massive battery packs. In 2026, this transformer bottleneck has reached a breaking point. When Jackson and his neighbors all plug in at the same time that their AC units are working overtime to combat the desert heat, the local transformer begins to vibrate and overheat. To prevent a catastrophic failure that would leave the entire block in the dark for days, the utility company uses Jackson's car as a flexible load that can be switched off instantly. This is the era of the grid interactive vehicle. Step by step, the relationship between the car and the home has flipped. In 2026, many American utilities have moved away from simple flat-rate pricing to sophisticated time-of-use or TOU structures. For Jackson, electricity at 4 p.m. might cost 45 cents per kilowatt-hour, while at 3 a.m., it drops to 6 cents. This price signal is designed to force behavior, but in 2026, the utility has moved beyond mere suggestions. Through what is known as a virtual power plant or VPP, Jackson's car has essentially become a distributed battery for the city. Case studies from pilots in California and Texas have shown that by aggregating 10,000 vehicles like Jackson's, a utility can effectively create a 100-megawatt power plant that exists only in software. When the grid is stressed, the utility doesn't just stop Jackson from charging. They might actually pull power back out of his truck and into the grid to keep the lights on in the local hospital. This vehicle-to-grid or V2G technology was once a futuristic promise, but in 2026, it is a tool of necessity. Imagine if Jackson's truck is helping to power his neighbor's oxygen machine during a peak load event. This sounds like a miracle of modern engineering, but it creates a massive logistical headache for Jackson. What if he has an emergency at 9 p.m. and his truck only has 15% charge because the utility has been siphoning his energy for 3 hours? In 2026, the software allows Jackson to set a floor limit, a reserve of energy the utility is not allowed to touch, but choosing that limit involves a complex trade-off between community stability and personal mobility. Furthermore, the constant cycling of the battery for grid services can lead to increased chemical wear. While manufacturers in 2026 have improved battery chemistry to handle more cycles, the long-term impact on resale value remains a subject of intense debate among automotive economists. We must also analyze the emergence of charging-free zones. In high-density urban centers like New York City or Chicago, the 2026 reality for apartment dwellers is even more stark. Because the underground electrical vaults in these cities are at maximum capacity, some municipalities have begun implementing temporary bans on street-side charging during peak business hours. If you are a rideshare driver in 2026, you are navigating a landscape where the price of fuel can quadruple in the span of 30 minutes. Data from 2025 showed that drivers were spending up to 20% of their shifts simply managing their energy logistics, moving from one quadrant of the city to another to find a charger that wasn't being throttled by the local utility. The infrastructure lag is exacerbated by the electrification of the heavy-duty sector. While Jackson is worried about his truck, a fleet of electric delivery vans and semi-trucks is drawing massive amounts of power from the same regional feeders. A single electric semi-truck charging at a megawatt-scale station pulls as much power as a small town. In 2026, we are seeing the results of an uncoordinated rollout where the speed of vehicle sales outpaced the speed of grid permitting. Historical trends show that it takes 5 to 7 years to upgrade a major substation, yet it only takes 30 minutes to sell an EV. This mismatch has led to the potential outcome of energy rationing becoming a permanent fixture of the American summer. For Jackson, the solution in 2026 involves a high-tech game of cat and mouse. He has invested in a home energy management system that coordinates his solar panels, his stationary wall battery, and his vehicle. When the utility tries to curtail his charging, his system switches to island mode, using his stored solar energy to bypass the grid entirely. But this level of energy independence is expensive, costing upwards of $30,000 in equipment and installation. This is creating a new class divide in America: the energy secure and the energy dependent. Those who can afford to bypass the grid are insulated from rationing, while renters and middle-class families like Jackson's are subject to the whims of the utility's software. We are also seeing the rise of secondary energy markets. In 2026, there are apps that allow Jackson to sell his charging slot to a neighbor who needs it more urgently. If Jackson doesn't need to drive until noon the next day, he can opt into a deeper curtailment program in exchange for credits on his bill, essentially being paid to stay off the road. This gamification of the American power grid is a radical departure from the flip-a-switch-and-forget-it era of the 20th century. It requires a level of digital literacy and daily management that many consumers find exhausting. The grid struggle is a physical manifestation of the friction inherent in any massive technological shift. The 2026 electric war is not fought with weapons, but with electrons and algorithms. It is a struggle for priority in a world where the demand for clean energy is infinite, but the copper wires in the ground are finite. As Jackson sits in his living room, watching his charging app count down the hours until his truck is allowed to draw power again, he realizes that his vehicle is no longer an independent machine. It is a tethered limb of a massive, struggling organism called the American power grid. However, as difficult as the domestic energy struggle has become, a much larger and more secretive battle is being won on the global stage. While Jackson is waiting for his car to charge, the very materials that make his car possible are being controlled by a silent international force. The American Revolution is being fueled by a supply chain that most people cannot even trace. In the next part, we are going to expose the silent takeover of 2026. Who really owns the dirt that makes your battery work? And why is the United States in a desperate race to reclaim its industrial soul before it is too late? We are going into the heart of the global battery Cold War. The minerals are the new oil, and the map of power has been redrawn. Are you ready to see who is actually in the driver's seat of the American economy? To grasp the full weight of the global battery Cold War in 2026, we must look at a sourcing manager in Detroit named Elena. Elena is not an engineer or a car designer, but she is perhaps the most important person in the building. Her job is to track the physical journey of every gram of lithium, cobalt, and nickel that enters the assembly line. In 2026, the United States has entered the era of the mineral passport. This is a digital ledger that proves a vehicle's components were sourced from countries with fair labor practices, and most importantly, from nations that have a free trade agreement with the US. If Elena fails to verify the origin of even a small fraction of the graphite used in an anode, the $7,500 tax credit for that vehicle vanishes instantly. This has turned the automotive industry into a geopolitical chess match where the board is the entire planet and the pieces are raw elements. Historical trends show that for the better part of 2 decades, a single global power held nearly 70% of the world's battery refining capacity. In the early 2020s, the US realized that while it could build the factories to assemble cars, it was almost entirely dependent on overseas refineries to process the dirt into battery-grade chemicals. By 2026, we are seeing the potential outcomes of the massive industrial pivot, known as the Inflation Reduction Act. The American landscape is now dotted with what industry insiders call gigafactories, but these are no longer just places where batteries are put together. They are becoming fully integrated chemical processing hubs. Imagine a facility in Georgia that spans the size of 30 football fields. This is where raw spodumene ore from Australia arrives by the ton, is crushed, treated with acid, and transformed into high-purity lithium hydroxide. This step-by-step localization is the only way for the U.S. to reclaim its industrial soul, but it is a race against a clock that is already ticking. The mineral war is not just about who has the biggest mines. It is about who has the most efficient chemistry. Consider the case study of the 2025 graphite shock. In late 2024, a major overseas exporter placed sudden restrictions on high-grade synthetic graphite, a material essential for the negative electrode of an EV battery. In 2026, the American response has been a frantic push toward silicon anode technology. By replacing graphite with silicon, manufacturers can theoretically increase energy density and reduce their dependence on volatile foreign supply chains. However, silicon expands and contracts during charging, which can lead to the battery literally tearing itself apart from the inside. Elena's job in 2026 involves managing the transition to these new, experimental chemistries while ensuring the cars remain safe for the American public. This is a high-stakes balancing act. Stay with the old materials and risk a supply chain collapse, or move to the new materials and risk a massive recall. Imagine if the United States could simply mine everything it needed within its own borders. In 2026, this dream is meeting a hard physical reality. We are currently seeing the development of the Lithium Valley, near the Salton Sea in California. This project aims to extract lithium from geothermal brine, superheated salty water pulled from deep underground. This is a revolutionary process because it uses the same energy used to generate electricity to also produce minerals, creating a near-zero carbon supply chain. But the data from early 2026 shows that these projects are facing significant technical hurdles. The brine is incredibly corrosive, eating through stainless steel pipes in weeks. For Elena and her team, this means the American-made lithium they were counting on is arriving slower than projected, forcing them to look toward friendshoring. Friendshoring is the 2026 strategy of building supply chains exclusively with trusted allies. We are seeing a massive alignment between the US, Canada, Australia, and South Korea. Case studies of these partnerships show a new kind of economic bloc. Australia provides the raw ore, Canada provides the nickel and the clean hydroelectric power for refining, and South Korea provides the advanced manufacturing expertise. This alliance is designed to create a battery ecosystem that is independent of any single adversarial power. But this security comes with a premium. Data indicates that batteries produced within this friendshored network can cost up to 15% more than those produced in the traditional, unverified global market. This is the hidden cost of the 2026 revolution. You are not just paying for a car, you are paying for the geopolitical stability of its ingredients. We also have to talk about the forgotten minerals, manganese and high-purity iron. As the industry moves toward LFP batteries to lower costs, the demand for iron and phosphate has skyrocketed. In 2026, the U.S. is rediscovering its own mining heritage, reopening old iron mines in the Midwest that were shuttered decades ago. But mining in 2026 is not like mining in 1950. It is a high-tech operation involving autonomous electric haul trucks and strict environmental monitoring. The potential outcomes of this mining resurgence are a revitalized Rust Belt, but it also creates a conflict with local communities and environmental advocates who worry about the impact on water tables and local ecosystems. Elena must navigate these ESG, environmental, social, and governance scores as carefully as she navigates the pricing of the minerals themselves. If a mine in Nevada is found to have violated a local environmental regulation, the batteries produced from that or could be blacklisted by ESG-focused investment funds, tanking the automaker's stock price. Furthermore, the 2026 mineral war has extended into the deep sea. We are seeing the first pilot programs for deep-sea mining, where robotic harvesters vacuum up polymetallic nodules from the floor of the Pacific Ocean. These nodules are rich in cobalt and nickel, potentially providing enough material to power billions of EVs. However, the international legal battles over these resources are reaching a fever pitch in 2026. The U.S. is currently in a standoff over who has the right to ocean dirt in international waters. This is the new frontier of the Cold War, where the battle lines are drawn miles beneath the surface of the sea. For the average American consumer, this mineral struggle feels distant until they see the sticker price. In 2026, the price of a car is directly tied to the daily spot price of lithium on the London Metal Exchange. We are moving toward a world where car prices fluctuate like gasoline prices used to. Imagine if the price of a Ford F-150 Lightning changed by $2,000 from Monday to Friday, because of a strike at a nickel mine in Indonesia. This volatility is the new normal, and it is why manufacturers are desperately trying to sign 10-year fixed-price contracts with miners, essentially becoming mining companies themselves. The global battery Cold War is a struggle for the very foundation of the 21st century economy. The nations that control the minerals and the refining will control the movement of people and goods. As Elena sits in her office in Detroit, she is looking at a map of the world that is defined not by borders, but by the location of refineries and the purity of cathode powders. The US is making progress, but the lead held by other nations is still significant. The 2026 revolution is a fight for every ounce of material, and the winner gets to dictate the future of the American road. But while Elena is fighting the mineral war abroad, a different kind of revolution is reaching its final stage right here at home. We have talked about the cars, the batteries, the software, and the grid. But what does the actual end state look like? In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to look at the great convergence of 2030. What happens when the electric car is no longer a choice but a requirement? We are exploring the final potential outcomes of the 2026 pivot, and the one thing that could still destroy the entire revolution if we don't fix it in the next 12 months. The finish line is in sight, but the final hurdle is the highest one yet. Are you ready for the conclusion of the American Electric Deep Dive? To understand the final hurdle of the American electric revolution, we must look at a driver named Thomas, located in a quiet suburb outside of Philadelphia in late 2026. Thomas is the owner of a 3-year-old electric SUV that has just crossed the 36,000-mile mark, which for most manufacturers represents the end of the comprehensive bumper-to-bumper warranty. In the era of internal combustion, this was the moment Thomas would take his car to a local independent mechanic, the neighborhood shop that has serviced his family's vehicles for 3 generations. But as Thomas pulls into the gravel driveway of that same shop in 2026, he is met with a sign that is becoming increasingly common across rural and suburban America: no high-voltage service authorized. This is the death of the shade tree mechanic, and it is the single most significant obstacle to the long-term sustainability of the EV market. The technical reality of 2026 is that servicing an electric vehicle requires more than just a set of wrenches and a diagnostic scanner. It requires a specialized high-voltage certification that can cost an independent shop upwards of $50,000 in equipment and training per technician. Historical trends in the automotive aftermarket show that while independent shops have always adapted to new technology, the barrier to entry for EV repair is fundamentally different. It involves specialized insulated tools, high-capacity lifts designed for 4-ton battery packs, and proprietary software access that many manufacturers are still reluctant to share. For Thomas, this means he is trapped in a dealership-only ecosystem. If his thermal management system develops a leak or his onboard charger fails, he cannot shop around for the best labor rate. He is tethered to a corporate service center that may have a 3-week backlog and a labor rate 40% higher than the local mechanic. This brings us to the potential outcomes of the Great Resale Cliff of 2026. We are currently seeing a massive divergence in the used car market. While gasoline-powered trucks and hybrids are holding their value with remarkable tenacity, first-generation mass-market EVs are experiencing unprecedented levels of depreciation. Case studies of 2023 and 2024 models show that many vehicles are losing 60% of their original MSRP within just 30 months. The reason is twofold: rapid technological obsolescence and battery anxiety. In 2026, buying a 3-year-old EV feels like buying a 3-year-old laptop. The newer 2026 models have better range, faster charging, and more efficient heat pumps, making the older models look like relics of a primitive era. For Thomas, this means he is underwater on his car loan, owing more to the bank than the car is worth on the open market. This financial trap is a silent crisis that could stall the transition for the American middle class, if not addressed through better battery longevity certifications. Step by step, the industry is trying to solve this through the implementation of the State of Health or SOH certificate. In 2026, when Thomas goes to trade in his car, a simple odometer reading is no longer enough. The dealership performs a deep cycle diagnostic that measures the internal resistance and chemical degradation of each battery module. This SOH certificate has become the new Carfax. If Thomas's certificate shows 92% health, his car maintains its value. If it shows 84%, the offer drops by $10,000. This level of transparency is essential for the second-hand market to function, but it puts immense pressure on the driver to maintain perfect charging habits. Imagine if every time you let your gas tank get too low, the resale value of your car dropped by $50. That is the psychological reality for the 2026 Electron Volts owner. Beyond the individual driver, we must look at the 2030 mandate convergence. In 2026, we are only 4 years away from the deadlines set by states like California, Washington, and New York, which require all new light-duty vehicle sales to be zero-emission. This legislative pressure is creating a massive industrial friction point. While the coastal states are charging ahead, the heartland is pushing back. Potential outcomes for 2027 and 2028 include a fragmented American car market, where certain models are only available in specific zip codes. We are seeing a historical trend where compliance cars are being funneled to mandate states, while high-margin gasoline heavy-duty trucks are being concentrated in the Midwest and South. This geographic polarization of the American road is a social challenge that technology alone cannot fix. However, the final part of the 2026 revolution is the great convergence of the car and the home. While Thomas is worried about his resale value, his neighbor Sarah is using her 2026 electric truck to achieve something previously impossible: total energy independence. During a severe autumn storm that knocked out the local grid for 48 hours, Sarah's truck didn't just sit in the garage, it powered her entire house. This is the culmination of vehicle-to-home or V2H technology. In 2026, the car is no longer just a mode of transport, it is a mobile power plant. The data from 2026 pilots shows that a single electric truck can power an average American home for up to 3 days. This is the ultimate killer app for the EV revolution. It transforms the vehicle from a depreciating asset into a critical piece of home infrastructure. For many Americans, the decision to go electric in 2026 is becoming less about saving the planet and more about saving the household during a crisis. The economic math for 2030 is already being written today. We are seeing the emergence of the total energy contract. In this scenario, Thomas doesn't just pay a car note and an electric bill. He pays a single subscription to an energy provider that covers his home power, his car payment, and his charging. This bundle is the final evolution of the automotive business model. It shifts the burden of maintenance and battery health back onto the provider, while Thomas simply pays for the utility of mobility and power. Historical trends in the software and solar industries suggest this is the most likely path for mass market adoption. It removes the sticker shock and the repair shock that currently haunt the market. As we conclude this deep dive masterclass, the reality of the 2026 electric car revolution is clear. It is a transition defined by incredible innovation, high-stakes geopolitics, and significant growing pains. The American road is being rebuilt in real time. We have moved from the era of "can it be done?" to "how do we live with it?" From the lithium mines of Nevada to the software labs of Silicon Valley, and the garages of people like Thomas, the revolution is no longer a future promise. It is a present reality. The final hurdle, the human element of maintenance, affordability, and social acceptance, is the most difficult one to clear. But the momentum of the American industrial machine is now fully behind this shift. The 2026 pivot has set the stage for a decade of transformation that will change everything from how we design our cities to how we fund our highways. We have exposed the secrets of the battery graveyard, the truth behind the charging lie, and the reality of the privacy apocalypse. But there is one final question that remains unanswered, a question that will determine the fate of every driver on the road as we move toward the end of the decade. What happens when the first generation of autonomous electric fleets finally hits the streets of every major U.S. city? In our next masterclass series, we are going to dive into the end of driving. We will explore the secret trials of robotaxi networks and why the car you bought in 2026 might be the last vehicle you ever truly own. The era of the driver is ending, and the era of the passenger is about to begin. Are you ready for the autonomous takeover?